Welcome to the Joy of Medicine. We're glad you're back. And I'm Trey Cashion, along with my dad, Dr. Richard Cashion, and Caleb's over there running the show.
Yeah, thank God for Caleb.
Thank God
hey, guys.
for Caleb. But anyway, I know you had a few stories that you wanted to start this off with, and
well, what I was thinking about is, having practiced for 55 years, but in the start of practice, right out of medical school, I went to Boston, and I had at the time 3 kids. So here's a guy making $300 a month with 3 kids. So I had they called it moonlighting, and in fact, it was a lot of stress because if you were caught moonlighting, you were fired. So even though I was at a very prestigious program, if they found out you're moonlighting, it's adios. You were
really?
You're gone. Gone. They didn't tolerate it. It was the zero level of tolerance. So anyway, I was moonlighting in the place. This is my 3rd year there. So I had sort of reached the hierarchy of residents, and so I had a little more time to moonlight. The place I was going is a place called Wing Memorial Hospital. So if you're ever in central Massachusetts, you can look at Wing Memorial and say
it's still there.
Oh, yeah, I think it is. I haven't been by lately, but anyway, it's about 60 or 70 miles west of Boston. So I used to get in the car late and head out and try to get there by time 6 o'clock or whatever, and work all night and into the next day, and then come home and work there. That was when I was young, stupid, and had a lot of energy. Yeah. But anyway, it was, so we're working in emergency rooms, and this is a very small community hospital. I think Wing Memorial Hospital, I don't remember exactly, but I'm trying to count up in my mind. It may have been 20-bed hospital. It's pretty small. The ICU was a single bed. It was not really an ICU because the only doctor in the hospital was me at the time, and so I'm all over the place doing stuff. So the main reason I was there was to cover the emergency room, and actually I had like 4 years of experience of emergency room medicine. This was part of the 4 years. But so I'm there working in the emergency room, and that's back in the day when they didn't have radios or stuff to tell what was happening. It's like now the police would telegraph ahead, hey, we got a big problem.
Right, but
we're on their way, so get ready. No,
just it was.
So the ambulance came crashing into the hospital, and the guy, ambulance driver, and his helper came crashing in. They said, we have a big problem. And I said, what's going on? They started bringing in all these kids that were dead.
Wow. Whoa.
And it had been a head-on collision on the Mass Pike. And there was a carload of children. I call them children. They were probably high school kids. And a truck. And somehow the kids got on the wrong side of the freeway. And when on Mass Pike, they're going 70 miles an hour or more. And so there was a head-on collision with these kids all in the car. And so if you can imagine, just to try to paint the scene, I'm a lone doctor with a lone nurse working in the emergency room, and this guy appears in the ambulance with packed. They had bodies in there laying around, whatever.
Oh my gosh!
And said, when the guy came in, I says, "How many do you think are out there?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I think they're 10." He said, 8 or 10. I said, so the nurse was there. I said, "Mrs. So-and-so, I want you to call the head doctor in this, I don't know who he is, the town, and I want to get every doctor in the county in here now, not tomorrow, now." It was like 2 o'clock in the morning. And so she started making calls and whatever, and they started bringing in these people. Well, if you can imagine, you can't just assume they're dead.
Right.
You cannot imagine the blood and everything all over the place and body parts and whatnot. So I'm by myself. And you've probably heard of triage medicine. Well, that was the epitome of triage medicine. I had to make a decision about whether they're dead or alive or what we could do. And we had no facilities at the hospital to take care of these people, these injured people. Like a lot of times you just say, well, matter of fact, now there would be a diversion. They would say, don't send the ambulance here, send it someplace else. And in fact, ambulance drivers now know which hospitals have nothing. So here I was out in the middle of Massachusetts with nothing, and it was a head-on collision with some very seriously injured people and several people that were dead. So, of course, I didn't know that. So I had the ambulance driver said, just bring them in and line them up here on the floor, and because we didn't have beds to put them on. And so I was checking around. This one is dead, and pronounce that one. Move on to the next one, and I found a couple that were alive and needed a lot of help. And so, and about that time, the nurse had gotten enough doctors in. So the first one that arrived, thank God, was an orthopedic surgeon. And so I said, you can see what's going on. He said, don't worry. He said, we'll get it together. And he started calling all of his buddies. Well, in a period of about 30 minutes, there must have been 10 doctors there.
Wow.
And maybe 10 or 15 nurses and people either from other towns or communities were coming to help. And so we're trying to, and shipping those out to Boston, which is about an hour drive by ambulance. And so, we're trying to get transportation for the ones that needed help in the big city hospital. And then we were trying to take care of the other ones. And so my job was not only cover the emergency room, but cover the entire hospital. So in the midst of all this, a young mother, I can't remember how old she was, she's probably in her 20s, comes in and carrying a child in her arms. So here, you can imagine.
Into the ER?
Yeah, into the ER, and with all this chaos going on. I mean, they were like, and she is obviously extraordinarily upset. We might have mentioned it some of the earlier shows. I had done some research as a medical student at Johns Hopkins, and the research I had done was in an entity called gram-negative septicemia. That's a bacteria. You've heard about E. coli. E. coli gets in your blood, and it can trigger a whole reaction, like an immune reaction, where all the blood coagulating elements are gone, and they start bleeding from everywhere. They have great blotches on their skin. Anyway, my research in medical school had been a vicinity, if anybody's interested in looking up, was the Waterhouse-Friedrich syndrome. And that was my research. So so I was very familiar with that, and I was very familiar with the look, is that what happens when the kids have this thing, they have petechiae, which are little blood spots all over their body, and gigantic blood pools, like maybe the size of a quarter, maybe the size of $50, but irregular, all over their body. And it's it's meningococcemia, which you've probably heard of, meningococcal meningitis, and it's the one they get vaccines for now. They didn't have vaccine back then. And so when I looked at this mother carrying the kid, I said, oh my Lord, this kid's got meningococcemia, Waterhouse-Friedrich syndrome, which I had done research in. I mean, what are the odds that happened? And I said, we got to get him into Boston because, I got IV started and get him on antibiotics, but the kid's probably not going to survive.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. And here's a little mother. So we got this car wreck with all these people dying, and then this mother had meningococcemia and her infant, and we're trying to get people moved to Boston for better medical care. And it was truly battlefield conditions. I mean, it was probably one of the most stressful nights of my life. And so what do you do in that? This
I was going to say,
this show is joy of medicine.
I mean, like that's overwhelming to me just thinking about it, honestly.
Yeah, it was overwhelming to me. And of course, it's 2:00 in the morning. You were tired a few minutes ago, but you're not tired now.
Yeah, you got a little adrenaline
rolling, and so you do what you can. You work with everybody you can, and the other doctors and nurses were all there, and it was amazing, the esprit de corps and the concept of these people that had never seen each other or never seen me for sure, because I was working as a moonlighter at the hospital. Everybody working together, shouting out orders, what needs to be done, and being followed appropriately by the nurses. So I give the Wing Memorial an A+ on that, and the people, all the doctors in the community. It was amazing. Well, anyway, when it was finally over, I think we pronounced six of the kids dead.
Awful.
And then that one kid, we got off to Boston to get some help for infectious disease. With the overwhelming odds, that one was going to die for sure. and with the mother. So you're overwhelmed, and obviously God's in control, but you feel like you need to do something or whatever. And all you can do in that situation, I can remember very well, is sitting over there and just praying, like, "Dear Jesus, help me. What is going on here?" And so you just keep going. You fight the good fight, as St. Paul said, and you just keep going. And then finally, all things ultimately will calm down,
Right.
settle down. So,
Dr. Cashion,
yes.
you see in, TV shows and movies and stuff like that, you see kind of one of the most common tropes is the alcoholic doctor or stuff like that. After situations like that, what's the truth in that? Are there a lot of doctors that turn to alcoholism and things like that? Or do you feel like a temptation or anything like that? Is it like, I need a stiff drink after this kind of thing?
Caleb, that's a good question. It's interesting, just as an aside, back in those days, there might have been drugs, but I didn't know anybody that was on drugs. I never even heard of it. So back then it was alcohol was the big thing. So people that would, that had that kind of a tendency would grab alcohol. I never did that, and I didn't know many people that did. Excuse me. What's going on with my voice? But anyway, so no, there's probably a lot of tendencies to try and escape that and do all the other things.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is on, I know that's in your 50 years or however long you've been a doctor. That's a once in a decade,
that particular severe, a couple of the stories that I've had but that's the king of the stories. Or what I call it. We're just totally overwhelmed.
But yeah, so I would think, part of it is, and I think Caleb's kind of bringing out there's how do you cope with that? Because you're obviously on the ones that show up with there's got to be a coping mechanism. There could be certainly one would be what you're saying, that a lot of prayer. Did you, I don't know. I hadn't heard this story before. So, did you think as a doctor at the time, to pray as those people came in for them specifically? Or?
Well, no, as a matter of fact, and I was a young doctor at the time, a long time ago. I was probably 4 years out of medical school, 3 or 4 years. Never had seen anything like that, and frankly, I didn't know anything what to do spiritually from being a Catholic or whatever. I obviously told the nurse to get a priest in here. Some of them are proud to be Catholic.
Yeah, up there you.
But the point, but the point is that we were so busy doing stuff, screaming, "I need that IV. I need give me a needle. I got to do this. I got to put a tube down this guy's lung to breathe for him." It's just like you see in the TV shows. But as a lone doctor, when that arrived, there was the one nurse and me in the entire hospital when this arrived at our door, and so we did the best we could, but we lost a lot of people. But it was, and to Caleb's question, yeah, those things, they bother you, but God has blessed me always with the understanding that He's in control. So it's not like I made the car wreck or I caused any of this. God for some reason wanted me to be there to deal with it. And I can remember the only one I can remember dealing with is the mother of that child. And
did you know what happened to that child?
Well, they shipped her off to Boston and the child did die. But while they were waiting, I got to spend some time with the mother. And since I had done research, I was actually sort of a semi-expert, the fact that I have done research in that particular, and that is so rare. And the fact that the fact that walked in, the minute I saw it, I didn't even have to examine the child. I just looked at it and I said, "Oh my Lord."
Wow.
And then of course I was a little concerned because it's a highly contagious disease. So I had to deal with her and whatever, and never even crossed my mind that I might get it, but back when you're in the heat of battle, I'm sure that's true with Army guys and Marines and stuff. When they're in the heat of battle, bullets are flying. You don't think about yourself. But obviously there was a serious issue about whether I would get meningococcus because you
did that cross your mind after the fact?
Long after on my way driving home. Remember, it was a 70-mile drive home. So when I finished up the next morning and drove home, I thought about it all the way.
Wow.
Was I going to bring this home to my kids? What was, all this?
Wow. I mean, I mean, a couple of things that kind of make me think of, number one, that idea that there are no accidents in terms of when you're presented with a situation that God, that seems like an overwhelming, maybe beyond what you would ever have expected. I'm probably certainly beyond anything you would have expected, but an understanding that, okay, God's put me here. And then I think from the standpoint of what I would think, having never and never will be in that position.
And I hope I never am again.
Right. That you have a sense, at least deep down, that, okay, God's put me here for this reason, and he's not going to give me more than I can handle, even though this seems like way more than I can handle.
Yeah, I agree. And those thoughts crossed my mind briefly, but I can tell you, in the heat of battle,
you're not really thinking about that.
You're not thinking about that. You're thinking about, what do I need to do this person? And then this one over here is dying, and then that one over there, it needs help. And until enough people get there to take care of all the situations, you are literally stretching your brain to the maximum about how you can be most efficient and help as many people as you can, knowing you're going to lose.
Well, so with that, particularly in those type of just critical situations, when you can't, I think that one of the things from a Christian perspective, from a Catholic perspective, is to make sure that you make some sort of offering prior to you going in there. I mean, one of the favorite books I've ever read was by Brother Lawrence of the Resurrection, calling practicing the presence of God. And he like fixed shoes for a living, which is nothing like this, but
I sold shoes,
but it was right. But it was something, that was, he had to really focus completely on at the time he was doing it. But he says that what you do is before you start doing something like that, you offer it to that. And obviously you wouldn't know. And even if you'd gotten a call saying they're coming in, you probably wouldn't really have had a full awareness of what's going to happen till the actual people. It's, it's kind of like I joke, you talk about having a baby come, Caleb, you just did, it's one thing to kind of in your mind put it there. It's another thing when you actually have a person in front of you,
Right.
And so I think that I think that the idea of encouraging people prior to them going to work to make an offering of everything, and then, Lord, I give you my intellect, my will, my strength, everything that I have for the sake of this, and so give me wisdom, give me courage, give me all these gifts, so that when I'm in the heat of it, and I may not be thinking of you at the moment, because I probably can't be thinking of you specifically at the moment, that you'd give me the strength.
And that's exactly where I ended up. And as a young doctor, I don't really think I appreciated that as much. But what I've started doing as I got older, every day before I'd wake up, I'd wake up first thing out of the bed, dear Lord, give me the strength, courage, and knowledge to deal with all the stuff that I'm going to see today. Right. Because it may be another night, like at Wing Memorial.
You never know. So to kind of make it, yeah, because you have to, when you're taking care of a patient, I assume, and I hope that the doctor is fully engaged in his intellect, his will, and what he's looking at with regard to me or anybody they're taking care of. I want them fully engaged. But the best way to do it is when you're in a down moment or before you walk in the door, is to kind of offer it and say, I'm here for you, Lord, and I'm going to take care of the people you put in front of me at this moment. Or at the moment they come in, I'm giving it to you now. And so just be there with me in that. I would think that would be super critical to having some joy in the midst of very anxious and or just out of the ordinary.
Well, but I agree with you completely. And what I have learned and as I mentioned, 55 years of doing this stuff, and I had 4 years of emergency medicine, and to be able to deal with those things, you do lose, at least I did. When you're thrown into that situation, you become 110% focused on what's going on right in front of your eyes.
Right.
And nothing else crosses your mind. As a matter of fact, I've had sometimes nurses pound on my back and say, Dr. Cashion, I'm talking to you.
Right. I've had that happen with my wife. You know? I mean, like, you don't hear the kids screaming? You know, so I'm focused on something.
So you do get so focused on that. And so that what I was getting around to saying, and I would encourage any young doctors or even whatever profession people are in, to say that prayer every morning when you get up is just help me deal with all the emergencies I may see. Well, it may not be an emergency, but some issue comes up to give me the strength, courage, and understanding to deal with it effectively. And that was a very, and I would say that led part to my joy in medicine, in the fact that I knew Jesus was there helping me. And,
right.
But I can remember that night very like it was, I'm sitting here talking to you now, like it was yesterday, and that was probably 50 years ago.
So part of it is to make that offering. And the other thing is kind of behind everything, an awareness that, which I think is really important to say, whoever gets put in front of me, it's God's design that put them in front of me. I would think that would give joy to people, you know, not asking why me, why am I here, but say, Lord, I'm here because you put me here, and these people that are coming to see me, even in non-emergent situations, that person in front of me is here because God placed them here to speak with me, and my job is to do the best with what I have on that. And as you were talking about 110% everything in, I can't think, and I think this is a way to look at it. There's an old saint, I think it was Saint Irenaeus, I'm not sure, but it's in the Catechism. It says that the glory of God is man fully alive. And while I would say it would be hard, but to be fully alive is to be, I think, fully engaged in what you're doing. Like, not part of you over here, part of you over there, but like what's in front of me, that's my focus. And I'm gonna give God glory by putting it all there. And I'm gonna use everything that He's given me. And you kind of have to prepare with an attitude, I think, before. Like an attitude before, Lord, not just the offering, but these people, whoever I see today, whatever circumstances happen, I know that they're your circumstances and you have prepared me for them. Even if I don't feel that way, even if I'm scared, because I think I even have to, in what I do, I have to remind myself of that frequently. I don't deal with anything close to that in my day-to-day life. But I think that mindset would give joy because you realize, okay, whatever happens today, God's not surprised by it. I mean,
no, He's not.
There's no surprise, and I might be surprised by it, but what I shouldn't be surprised at is that He gave me a situation that I'm equipped to deal with because He put me in this situation, whether I know it or not. I'm an old football coach, so I'm kind of getting chills. I'm thinking, like, you know, that's the way you kind of got to go at it. I mean,
Trey, it is Saint Irenaeus.
It is Saint Irenaeus.
And the full quote is, "The glory of God is man fully alive, but the life of man is the vision of God." Right.
And so you have the opportunity to give God glory not by the success that you have. I mean, obviously, if they showed up dead, it was already past that. But to recognize, okay, those dead people came in your mind, to be able to say, He even put them in front of me at the moment. So to be actively thinking, you know, even if it's just Lord, take care of this one, I got to go to the next one. You know?
Yeah, and in fact, it takes a little bit of effort to know, is the person dead or not? So that's not like, turn, you know, right. So each individual that you do, you're spending time with and going over things and whatever. But to get back to Caleb's question back a few minutes ago, which I didn't completely answer to him, the stress of that leads to excess alcohol and nowadays maybe excess drugs. And unfortunately, I have known a lot of my contemporaries and even younger ones that have difficulty handling that. And I think that that I wish I could share with the young people to realize the answer is it's not, you do your best. That's what my mother always told me. You always do your best. And then if something goes wrong, you did your best. There's nothing else you can do.
That's really all you got to, that's all you can do is just say, I'm going to do.
But sometimes it's hard to realize that. In other words, could I, particularly second guessing yourself in medical situations, what if I had done this or what if I had done that, whatever happened? And in medical training, there's a thing called is a conference you have after some crisis, and you go over everything with many people there, including great minds and teachers and whatnot. And did you think about this? Did you think about that? And that's always a very stressful thing.
Yes,
particularly
absolutely.
as a young one. What's going on here? But yeah, so I think that Caleb, to answer your question, that is why there's probably a lot of alcoholism. And now maybe drugs. I don't know. Yeah. But when I was coming through, the drugs didn't exist almost.
And I've heard that I was talking with a friend of yours of mine. I won't mention him, but he was telling me about how bad that problem becomes as early as in medical school for people. So with one starting, that's something that's my prayer. But I what I've told him going in is this is going to be the hardest thing to date you've ever done. I mean, there's nothing in the past is going to be close to what you're going to go through over the next 4, 6, how many ever years that you have. But I've also said, but God's placed you exactly in that moment, and you have to connect. I said, even if you can spend 10 minutes, 5 minutes, run by an adoration chapel and just stick your head in and say, Lord, I'm so busy, but I just want to say hi and grant me the grace I need to get through whatever the next thing I'm going
Trey,
through.
so I have a question about that. It sounds like, sure, Dr. Cashion, it's that remembering the presence of God, remembering that God put you here and put these people in front of you, is what really helped you kind of deal with that stress. Mm-hmm. How does a person, or what are some tips you have for how do you kind of internalize that way of thinking that, and because I think a lot of people can actively look back on their life and like, oh, God put that person, but how do you kind of do that day to day without having to actually like actively do that, where you kind of like just internalize that idea and that reality for yourself, where it just becomes part of the way you think all the time?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to throw in what I think, because I think what happens as Christians is we have to keep reminding ourselves of that. I mean, you can't. It's not one of those things you kind of just say once, and it's kind of intellectual. Of course, God's in control, all that type of stuff. I mean, you really have to pray for the Holy Spirit to kind of remind you, but to continually put it in front of you. Because one of the things, again, is, and my mom, was amazing at being able to look at somebody and hug them and not even hardly know them. They would receive it, which always amazed me. And she would just say, I see Jesus in that person. And I think we need more healthcare professionals, people to really, I think there's a lot that actually, if you ask them, they believe it, but they have to remind themselves of that. Mm-hmm. Even particularly the ones you don't necessarily like, or the situations you'd rather not be in, that there's that. So I think it's part of virtue. It's a habitual state that you have to remind yourself as frequently as you can, and ask for the grace that's in the middle of something, particularly if somebody's annoying you or you don't particularly like them, but you still got to, that's it. I mean, Mother Teresa, I think, used to always say it's really easy to love the people you like. I mean, the hard thing is to love the ones you don't like, and so that's my thought is you have to have kind of something that makes you remember that. So maybe you include that in that, I used to say with the kids, and I need to start saying it again, may I be Jesus to the people I meet, and may I see Jesus in the people that I come across today, just good. At the beginning of the day. And then you go do your work. I mean, that's what you do. And then ask for the grace to be reminded when maybe you're flustered or upset, or I don't really like this person, or whatever.
Well, a lot of things in medicine and in other professions is habit.
Exactly.
What is your habit? So if you make a habit of it, that you are going to do this every day, that when it happens, you've done it. So it's not like you have to go back and backtrack.
Right. So, well, I think probably kind of wrap this up. I think thanks for sharing that. I've never heard that story before. I honestly, I mean, just like I said, even just as imagining it in my mind, I would be overwhelming to go through that. But I think it's important from this one to kind of take and encourage the people who are listening, regardless of whether they're in medicine or not, but particularly if they are in medicine, to get in the habit, every day before you go to say the prayer, Lord, give me the wisdom, the strength, the courage to do everything that I need to do, that I might use the gifts and talents you've given me for the sake of those people you put in front of me. And then help me to recognize that they're not just a person, they are actually Jesus to me in that moment. Whether I like the situation or like the person in front of me, my job is to be Jesus back to them as I recognize Jesus in them. I think if we can encourage people to have that mentality, that would be helpful. And hopefully nobody out there has to go through something like that.
Well, in my 55 years, that was the worst exposed. So I don't know why it popped into my mind the other day, and just a really quick backtrack. I've dealt with a lot of soldiers and battlefield conditions and stuff that came back. And what do they want? They want a hug. They don't want to talk. They don't want, people say, what can I say? And that kind of thing. Well, the thing, you just give them a hug.
Right. And I think we need to remember that as well. Is sometimes you think because you have all this wisdom that that's what I've got to be. And the reality is you need to be a human taking care of another human in the end. And that means that some of that is just being compassionate, loving, and even giving them a hug. So with that, we'll end this one. Hopefully it was good. Thanks for sharing that, Dad. That was a little bit troubling, but certainly I think was a good one. So we'll see you next time. God bless.